We're now ready for our first highlighted presentation. As Wayne described, we'll do this in full in this plenary session. Research Team 302, Interface Management, an emerging project management discipline, will present their research in the plenary session today. Please welcome to the stage members of Research Team 302, Justin Goodman from Jacobs, Todd LaBar from Air Products, and SangHyun Lee from the University of Michigan.
Hi, I'm Walt Nako, Deputy Director of Smithsonian Facilities. This is the new National Museum of African American History and Culture, currently under construction on the National Mall in Washington, D.C. The design was delivered in 9 packages by a consortium of 4 architectural firms and is being built by a joint venture of 3 general contractors. We have 3 external reviewing agencies and multiple internal stakeholders. All of this seems to be the new normal. I need to be confident that our project teams are using the best tools available to effectively and successfully deal with this increasingly complex type of project.
Good morning, everyone. Hope everyone has got their second or third cup of coffee this morning. I hope you're energized and ready to get started with today's highlighted plenary session, followed by our other plenary sessions. We just watched a video from Walt Nako talking about a brand new museum project being executed on our nation's capital. And he noted the design team was a consortium of 4 design firms and 3 general contractors were involved. You know, by a show of hands in the audience, who here has been a part of a project that had multiple designers or, say, multiple design firms or multiple contractors? Show of hands. Great. Keep them up while we get a quick count, if you will. 1, no, just kidding. Go ahead and put them down. You know, it's with great pleasure and great honor that RT 302 is going to be able to deliver a great topic, an emerging project management discipline. So on behalf of RT 302, we want to thank each and every one of you for your attendance to the conference, your attention, and also your forthcoming participation. We have some fun questions to ask you. But I also want to give a quick and special thanks to Rex and his conference committee team. Thank you all so much for organizing yet another amazing conference. I know myself included, I saw a number of us last night trying to relive our glory high school football days. You know, make sure you ice your shoulder. I'm pretty sore as well. So without further ado, let's just jump into it. And quickly, I want to highlight what we hope to learn and what we hope to achieve today through this session. First and foremost, we want to learn about interface management, what it is, why we need it. And then we're going to talk about some of our research findings, talk about some of our analyses, and then we're going to showcase to you some of the really neat and really cool products and tools that we developed from our research. And then when we close up the presentation, I'm also going to invite up at the very end some of our panel experts that will field questions from the audience that you may have. So let's jump right into it. What is interface management? Is it an idea? Is it a set of norms? You know, what does it mean to each and every one of you? Now, if you would, keep your clickers handy in front of you. I'm going to ask a series of questions. These questions will help us take a look at the makeup of this audience, which I would argue, and my team would argue, the makeup of this audience is a pretty good representation of our industry. Now, these questions will help us quickly gauge the industry's exposure to interface management. So our first question simply is, have you heard of interface management or its practices? I'm going to open the polling. And I know there's 700 people in there, so we're going to wait until every last one comes in. It's racking up, okay. Still steady income, okay. I'm going to go ahead and close the polling just to keep us on track. Wow, that's very impressive. And that's what we would have guessed. The majority of us in this audience have heard of interface management. Whether you're involved in interface management or whether you read the opening presentation highlight and that's how you learned about it. For those of you who haven't heard about it, welcome. I hope to, and we hope to enhance your knowledge around the topic. Another question. For those of us that have heard of interface management, do you believe that your understanding of the topic directly aligns with that of, say, your colleagues, your competitors, your clients. I'll go ahead and open the polling. Fantastic. The clickers are working very nicely. Thank you all. Okay, we'll go ahead and close it. Again, exactly what our team would have suspected. The majority of us in this audience have heard of interface management, but there is low confidence in its uniformity across our industry. Let me ask one more question. Does your company employ formal interface management practices or procedures? And let me explain real quick. Do you have interface managers? Do you have standard procedures around interface? Or do you even have perhaps custom tailored software? I'll go ahead and open the polling. All right. They're coming in. Great, great. Close the polling. No. No. Okay, well, this is great. This validates our research and the need for us. Fantastic. So let's just move on, and let's say, what is interface management? And I can proudly say that CII now defines interface management as the management of communications, of relationships, and deliverables among two or more stakeholders. Now, that's a fairly broad definition, and you're probably thinking how we came up with such a definition for such a broad topic. And to kind of help us understand this and put it into a fuller context, it's important to talk about the types of interfaces. Generally speaking, we have two types. There are soft interfaces. These are your exchanging of information between persons and parties. These are the cultural aspects and the language differences our projects face. The other type is hard interfaces. These are the physical relationships, let's say your utility tie-in or your boundary lines. So we understand the types of interfaces. Let's take a look at how they structure into what we call an interface management hierarchy. This is important to understand that at the very top level, we have an interface stakeholder. And for our simple example today, let's call that owner and contractor. Now, I'll make a quick side note that this structure can be expanded to multiple stakeholders, multiple interface points. It can be as big as your project requires. So at the very top, we have an owner and a contractor. And right off the bat, we have a relationship that has to be managed. Now, if we drop below level, these are the interface points. These is where you find, you begin to establish the requirements of the interface, requirements for the stakeholders. So for our example, let's use contract, which is an example of a soft interface. We have a battery limit and a utility tie-in, which are examples of hard interfaces. Going below, we have the interface agreements. This is where we really define and really establish the deliverables of each of those interface points. So for, let's say, the contract, you have a scope document. That defines what you're supposed to build or deliver to the owner. You have a payment clause that both parties agree to. On the hard interface side, you have location data. Let's say the tie-in point is 3 feet off the gas line and 4 feet below ground. Now, as we move down to the lower level, this is where the nuts and bolts of interface management really are. These are the action items, interface action items, and the subsequent documentation. So for our example, let's say within the scope, there are some reporting requirements. And with those reportings, you have, say, daily construction reports, transmittals, et cetera, et cetera. So now looking at the types of interfaces, looking at how they structure into a hierarchy, let's bring it full circle and show how they fall into a network of interfaces. Here on this slide, we have some nodes with letters I, C, or J. These are your interface stakeholders, your contractors, your owners, your engineers, your designers, et cetera. The edge connectors between the nodes, these are your interface points. It could be one interface point, it could be 100 interface points. There is no cap to the interfaces. And so really, if you think about it and you look at it, interface management really is the efficient corralling of communications, of relationships, and deliverables between two or more stakeholders. And therefore, we define interface management as such. Excuse me right quick. So that's what is interface management. Now let's change gears and talk about why interface management. You know, why now? What's changed and evolved in our industry that led CII to devote an entire research team, an entire 2 years to this very topic? And to help kind of segue into this discussion, I want to show a quick video from Bob Zaist with the URS Corporation.
Hello, I'm Bob Zaist, Senior Corporate Vice President with URS Corporation. URS is a large engineering, construction, and technical solutions company executing projects in the infrastructure, power, industrial, oil and gas, and federal market sectors here in North America, along with over 30 countries globally. As the trend in our projects becomes larger in size and complexity, coupled with engineering and execution support for multiple geographies, layered with numerous stakeholders and interfaces, the management of critical interfaces becomes an increasingly important factor in the success of our projects. At URS, we believe that the application of interface management as a defined process improves the alignment between the stakeholders and reduces conflict through increased visibility, awareness, and clarity of roles, responsibilities, and deliverables.
All right. Well, as you probably caught, and as Bob alluded to, it has a lot to do with complexity our projects are facing. Now, it's important to note that we use complexity in its broadest terms, from the geographical disbursement of our projects to the advanced technologies we have to utilize on our projects to the ever-evolving project delivery strategies, and of course, the ever-compressing fast-track schedules that we wanted to deliver our projects on. Now, I'm going to ask you again to grab your clickers and keep them handy for this section, because I'm going to ask you a couple of questions several times throughout the section. The first question I want to ask is, do the majority of your projects mostly involve a simple relationship between two or more parties? Or do your projects have multiple parties with varying levels of interest and impact on the project's outcome? Go ahead and open the polls. Let the answers come in. Looks like it's slowing down, so I'll go ahead and close the poll and let's take a look at it. See, again, the majority of our projects have multiple stakeholders, multiple interface points from those stakeholders. Now, let's move on to a next question. And I want us to look forward, and I want you to think, over the next decade, do you anticipate the level of complexity on your projects to increase or decrease or even stay the same? I'll go ahead and open the polls. Fantastic. Okay, it looks like we're slowing down on the results, so I'll go ahead and close the poll. That's exactly what we all expect, is our projects in the future are not foreseen to get any easier. We're not going to be building less and less complex projects. We're going to be building more and more complex. So let's take a quick walk through some great illustrations. And what you have on the screen here is what we would call a simple or less complex project. And what you're seeing here is you're seeing the owner, the designer, and the contractor co-located, let's say, just in the same office. Now, the point to note here is the management of those communications and those relationships and those deliverables are fairly easy. They're fairly real time. Now, if we wanted to take this the next step up in complexity, let's just take the same project team and let's split them out. You've got, let's say, the owner in New York, the contractor in Louisiana, you've got the engineer in Europe. Now, what you have is you've got those same lines of communication that exchange information and agreements and deliverables. They're being managed and exchanged over various means. You've got hasty phone calls, or you've got very quick, ambiguous emails, and a lot of times that information in those agreements can be misinterpreted or misunderstood. I mean, I'm guilty of it. I'm just as guilty as probably most of us in this room of sending a really quick, ambiguous email. Now, for illustration purposes, let's take this the next level up in complexity regarding our stakeholders, and let's add an engineer to the team. Let's, another stakeholder. Now, the point to note here is that as we begin to increase our stakeholders, we still have to manage those lines of communication, those relationships, that information that's flowing over those ambiguous means. Now, what I want to point out is that we've increased our team by 1, but we've increased our relationships and our lines of communication by 6. It's now gone up to 6. So as you increase your team members or your stakeholders, your communication channels and your relationships will begin to exponentially increase. So now, for, again, illustrative purposes, let's increase our team to 6. With 6 stakeholders, we now have 15 lines of communication and relationships and 15 sources of deliverables that have to be effectively managed to secure success on your project. Let's do a fun what if, okay? Let's say our electrical engineer, we're working on an offshore platform, and the electrical engineer decides to increase the weight of their generator. Okay, no problem, that can happen. The electrical engineer then has to notify the lead engineer, okay? The lead engineer first needs to verify with the other discipline engineers that there are no changes required. So he or she notifies the mechanical engineer. The mechanical engineer checks his systems, no problem, we're good to go. But we also have to notify the structural engineer. Well, in this case, the structural engineer now says, whoa. I have to redesign a new structural system because simply the weight just can't be handled with the current structural design. So I have to redesign. That's going to be more cost, and I have to read the time to redo it. So that's going to be a schedule delay. So the structural engineer then informs the electrical engineer. Then he, in turn, informs the owner. And as you can imagine, the owners in this room, you're probably not going to be too happy. So it's fun to envision, or it's a challenge to envision, if you will, trying to manage this without a structured approach. So now that we've talked about the complexity that happens with the number of stakeholders, both in your same town or also globally dispersed, let's talk about schedule and how that adds to complexity. The top schedule, what I would call a finish to start relationship, we're very familiar with these in the past, and I believe these are tending to become a thing of the past. The schedules that we're most commonly used to are the fast-track compressed schedules, and the challenge with these is that at each overlap, you have a reiteration of design. You have a change of agreements. You have changes in designs, whether it's a owner design change, or let's say there's a field condition that wasn't thought of and there's a new field change design. And it is this level of complexity that adds to our project's challenges. So I want to jump into some more questions, if you will. And this question kind of gears us into a new direction. And it is, have multiple locations, languages, or cultural differences affected the complexity of your projects? I'll go ahead and open the poll. Anyone want to take a verbal guess of what the answer is going to be? Okay, it looks like the counts are beginning to slow down, so I'll go ahead and close the... Fantastic. We were thinking maybe 80-20, but 90-10 works. But the point here is that the majority of the projects that us in this room, you here, we've already experienced increased complexity from a different language, maybe, or a different cultural aspects. Let's do another question. on average, how many execution locations are involved in your projects? I'm going to open the polls. You guys are quick. All right. Well, as it's slowing down, I'll go ahead and close the polls and let's take a look. Okay, wow. That's pretty good. So the less than 5 group, we would have expected a little lower number from our research, but that's still good because you look at the 5 to 10 and the more than 10, that's still quite a majority of our projects have a lot of stakeholders involved. So I want to just quickly show a model of a project from Ontario Hydro that was done back in the 80s. And this project, and what we're trying to show here is the relatively close proximity to the execution centers. What you're seeing on the screen, let's say it's a max spread of 100 miles between the 2 extreme centers. So what we can reasonably assume is that they're probably working on the same timetables, probably working very similar hours. There is presumably very similar cultural aspects. They're working to the same sets of standards. I would guess they're working with the same languages. And therefore, the complexity of the project really is contained within the envelope of that project. Now, I'm not trying to say that a nuclear power station isn't complex by any means. I'm just saying that it's not compounded by these external complexity factors. Now, let's go to the other end of the spectrum into a more modern model that we're all probably pretty fairly used to. This is what we call the globally dispersed project execution model. And what I want to note here is we've got the construction site in the Gulf South United States. We've got engineering that's going on between Europe and India. And we've got fabrication concurrently going on in the northern and southern hemispheres. Just looking at this model, you can count the external complexity factors. We've got different geographies, time zones. We've got different languages. Heck, for those of us who live in the Gulf South, we know there's multiple languages there. You've got different technologies from different parts of the world, and you've got definitely different cultures. So, and to help kind of highlight the point that we're making about globally dispersed projects and our global industry, I want to show another quick clip from Claude Vian with Petrobras in Rio de Janeiro.
My dear colleagues, my name is Claudio Viana, General Manager responsible for project management practices and assessment in Petrobras. Our challenging business plan comprises investments of about $220 billion in the next 5 years. Therefore, to achieve these challenging goals, we need a good interface management since our delivery environment has many issues like increased technical complexity, local content, less experienced workforce, and suppliers across the globe. My dear colleagues, my name is...
It was so good the first time we wanted to hear it again. Thank you all so much, and I want to jump back into our last set of questions, so if you would grab your clickers. Now, of the answer choices listed below, what complexity factor most warrants formal interface management practices? The poll appears, yep, poll's open. All right. All right, looks like the answer choices are all about in, so I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. Wow, okay, fantastic. So the majority of us looked at C, multiple owners, contractors, and subcontractors. Now, I'm sure some of you are thinking, where's answer choice F, all of the above, because all of us experience these different complexity factors. Let's do one last question. Of the below listed methods, which of these is the best means to communicate critical interface information with another stakeholder? I'll go ahead and open the poll. Good response, rate. Good job, guys. Okay, looks like we're slowing down a little bit, so I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. All right, meeting and a meeting with book notes or with both notes were taken and a written agreement in a standard form. And that's what we would have expected. You would err on the side of what's most formal. But in reality, and what we found is that a lot of times it's a judgment call based on your circumstances. There are situations where an email exchange could be an appropriate manner. Now, we've talked about what is interface management, and we've now talked about why interface management. But now there could be the question, and I hope the question is stirring in your mind, is okay, you know, RT302, we understand the what, we're getting the why, but you know, how do I know what level or how much of or how robust of a program do I need for my project? And to help us answer that or help us gauge that, I want to introduce to you the very, very highly scientific complexity curve. Now, artistic ability aside, this fun hand sketch really does illustrate the fit-for-purpose need of interface management. There are projects that we do every day that simply don't require a custom-tailored software, but that does not mean that interface management isn't required at all. Now, later on in the presentation, we're going to showcase some of our tools, one of which will help you determine the level of interface management your project could benefit from. Now, I want to take a quick pause and note that we've introduced, or I've introduced a new term to the mix, and that is formal interface management. Our last two questions were about formal interface management. Our complexity curve is regarding formal interface management. So the question we ask ourselves is, well, okay, what is formal interface management, and how does it fall under the umbrella of interface management? And to that, RT302 looked at it in a couple of ways, and really, formal interface management is a concerted effort, a conscious approach to managing those hard and soft interfaces that your project faces. With formal interface management, you have a dedicated personnel, whether it's one person or a team of persons. You have a system that collects and organizes and distributes information accordingly. You'll have standard procedures and standardized forms that help direct the flow of information on your project. It could even go as robust as having a custom-tailored software. And to us, that's what formal interface management is. Now, I'd like to go ahead and hand your attention over to Dr. Lee with the University of Michigan. Dr. Lee is going to share with you some of our research findings as well as some of our analyses. Dr. Lee?
Thank you, Justin. Hello, everyone. As Justin explained, interface management is an emerging discipline. As the project management has been an important discipline since 1950s, project control since 60s, quality management since 70s, and risk management since 80s, interface management has been an important discipline since 2000. Nowadays, interface management is no longer a special practice that we don't have to know. Rather, it becomes part of normal project management practice like project controls and quality and risk management. Despite the importance of the interface management, we still do not have enough knowledge on the current status of interface management, as well as how it has to be executed. Thus, our team conducted research to get to know more about interface management in construction. First, we conducted a literature review, studying existing CII report, existing literature on interface management in construction and other disciplines. What we learned from our literature review is that there are some research efforts to integrate different contractors, systems, and software, but there is no research effort on how to systematically integrate, systematically deal with the interfaces in construction in terms of the details and process and procedure. In addition, research effort in other disciplines, like aerospace engineering, may not be readily suitable to be applied to construction because they don't talk about the details. So our team created our own survey questionnaire to get to know more about interface management in construction. We use face-to-face and phone interview to administer the survey. The reason that we chose the interview process is that interface management has not been standardized, so that people may not understand the meanings of terms related to interface management used in the survey questionnaire. Throughout the interview process, we are able to make sure the meanings of the terms used in the survey questionnaire. In total, 46 projects were interviewed, which represent over $150 billion in CapEx. Now, let me talk about some data that we collected. The first one shows the relationship between interface management formality and project size. The horizontal axis shows the different project dollar values. The vertical one shows the number of projects that belong to different project dollar values. The gray bar, shows the project with the informal interface management, and red one shows the project with the formal interface management. The graph shows that formal interface management are more prevalent in projects of higher dollar value. This one shows the relationship between interface management formality and different project delivery strategies. The horizontal axis shows the different project delivery strategies, like design, bid, build, design, bid, EPCM, EPC, and others. Here, others mean that engineering and procurement and construction, engineering only, procurement only, and construction only. The graph shows that EPC and EPCM are most common project delivery strategies for the project with the formal interface management. This one shows the relationship between interface management formality and interface stakeholders. The horizontal axis shows the different number of interface stakeholders. As you see here, interface management, formal interface management is more prevalent on the project with more stakeholders. We also conducted correlation analysis between project characteristics and interface management implementation. Our analysis shows that project size is highly correlated with the interface management implementation. In other words, if a project size is large, there is a high chance that interface management has been implemented. In addition, it has been found that number of interface stakeholders, number of joint ventures and owners, and number of execution locations are correlated with interface management implementation, which resonate what Justin explained. We also took a look at which phase interface management has been implemented. Among the project data we collected, 88% of our projects were developed with a parallel project phasing, while 12% of the project were developed with a sequential project phasing. It has been found that most projects started interface management at either concept or detailed scope phase. In other words, interface management has been implemented in the early stage of our project. The last analysis that I want to share with you is how effective interface management is for project performance. For example, if a project has a formal interface management, how does it affect cost performance? So we collected cost performance data from the sum of projects that we interviewed. The left side shows the cost growth of the project with the informal interface management. The right side shows the cost growth of the project with the formal interface management. Our analysis shows that projects with a formal interface management can likely have lower mean of cost growth, here 18% versus 4%, and particularly less standard deviation, which can demonstrate the usefulness of interface management in managing cost growth. More research findings can be found in our research summary and research report. Now let me introduce Todd LaBar from Air Product, who is going to talk about the tools that we developed from our research. Before that, let's watch the following video.
Hello, I'm Matthew Merkel, HYCO Engineering Manager at Air Products. As we expand our market globally, we are facing more challenges dealing with complex interfaces. Some examples are multiple engineering centers across different geographies, cultural interfaces within these execution centers, and management of our subcontractors within new geographies. In order for us to stay competitive in the ever-expanding global market, it's imperative to have processes and tools to measure interface complexity. Tools such as ICAT allow us to properly assess the risks with the associated project and place the proper resources to drive the project to the finish line.
Thank you, Dr. Lee. Talk? Okay, thanks. All right, thank you, Dr. Lee. Hello, everyone, and special thanks to all those who stuck around to slide 45. I was granted the opportunity to work as part of this interface management research team, and apparently I drew the third shortest straw to go through the next set of information. You're looking at the world we work in today: globally dispersed execution teams, engineering centers, fabricators, suppliers. The list goes on, and continues to grow globally versus a central location. As our industries continue to expand globally, there's a growing need for formal interface management. RT 302 developed a common language and definitions which your company can use to expand into your own work processes and procedures. Part of our research included the development of tools to better evaluate the level of formal and non-formal interface management. Will these tools provide solutions for every situation? No. But as our projects grow in complexity and geographic locations, we sometimes need to take a step back and relook how we'll interface with these multiple execution centers and contractors. These tools better define the level of interface management required for your project. Let's have a look at each one of these tools. I'm only going to briefly explain each tool, but like they say, you need to read the book to get the full story. The first tool we have in Interface Management Toolbox is PIRI, which stands for Project Interface Risk Impact Matrix. This will be your first high-level snapshot to determine your project's need from less formal to more formal interface management. It also provides general guidance on the types of implementation. For example, the lower left represents simplistic interface management, which may be accomplished as using something simple as a spreadsheet. While the upper right is a formal interface management with dedicated IM manager, staff, and formal software. Use the PIRI matrix to help establish the formality and associated costs necessary for the interfaces to manage your project. The next tool that we have is an interactive spreadsheet, ICAT, which stands for Interface Complexity Assessment Tool. ICAT complements the PIRI matrix, but is a lower level tool to help quantify and establish the complexity between two interface stakeholders. The tool walks you through probing questions such as cultural and geographic interfaces, then through the typical technical and scope interfaces. You simply enter your rating from 0 to 2 for each of the categories, and ICAT helps you better determine the two stakeholders' level of interface complexity. It's a great tool and really helps you plan the level of interface management your project may need. Let's have a look what others have to say.
One of the ways in which we have utilized the ICAT was in highlighting to our client the need for more formal interface management activities between our project team and the client's OSBL contractor. This was done by first completing the ICAT to rate the complexity of the relationship between our client and us. The ICAT quickly showed the complexity rating to be fairly low, due in part to our long-term relationship. Secondly, we used the ICAT to rate the complexity of the relationship between us and our client's OSBL contractor. The ICAT showed the complexity rating approaching the high end of the scale, thereby indicating a project risk. This information was presented to our client as part of an executive review meeting. It was used to stress the potential risk associated with the interface between their two contractors. By using this tool, we promoted a positive discussion to enlist our client's support in obtaining the OSBL contractor's buy-in to more formal interface management activities. The ICAT is proving to be another great addition to the project management toolkit. It is quick and easy to use and provides graphics that grab the reader's attention.
Here at Nova Mining and Minerals in the southern tip of Africa, we are very, very excited about ICAT. Having the right partners on board for our projects is extremely important for the success of those projects. Choosing the right partners can be difficult though, since cost and schedule are not the only considerations in making the selection. ICAT now provides us with a way to calculate the complexity of the interface with these potential partners. This powerful tool developed by CII helps us in a number of ways. Firstly, it helps to pre-qualify bidders or potential partners before we actually get them on board. It also helps to add more granularity to tender evaluations. ICAT helps us by identifying elements of an interface that carry a significant amount of risk. This then allows us to identify and implement mitigation measures for those risks, all to the benefit of the project and to the benefit of our clients. If you're still managing interfaces with outdated tools like these, maybe it's time to pay a visit to CII's website to download your copy of ICAT.
All right, thank you, Rocky Balboa. Okay, so I know in a few minutes I have on stage, it's difficult to get the full flavor of the tools I just briefly scratched the surface on. So what explains the tools in further detail? The IMIGE, I know, what did I say? IMAGE for short, which stands for Interface Management Implementation Guide. It's your answer to all life's questions. No, I'm only joking, but it will address the details of how interface management is used or can be formally introduced on your projects. The IMAGE guide explains the research findings in further detail and further elaborates the tools I just briefly explained. Additionally, it provides common definitions and nomenclature when using an interface management process. Included in the IMAGE guide is the IM maturity matrix and the interface roadmap. Both help you develop, implement, and sustain interface management throughout the project phases. So, in summary, the 5 tools I mentioned. PIRI provides you a high-level snapshot of interface management based on risk and complexity. ICAT is your low-level details of how much interface management is required between 2 stakeholders. IMAGE, your guide for interface management definition and implementation, supported with the IM maturity matrix and an implementation roadmap to help you steer the way. Thank you. Now I'd like to turn it back over to Justin to remind us of our objectives.
Thanks so much, man. All right. Is my mic back on? Good. Okay, well, let's just walk back through what we hope to achieve from our session today. We wanted to learn about interface management. Well, we now have an industry-established and accepted definition of what interface management is. We can now understand and have a macro grasp of why interface management is required. Dr. Lee shared with you our research, our findings, our research methodologies, our analyses, and our interpretations. And then as you saw, Todd just showcased our tools and products that we have available to you very soon. I actually believe you can get them online now from the annual conference download site. So with that, the question's probably asking in your head, what's in it for me? What do I get out of it? I believe Wayne mentioned that earlier of what's in it for me. Well, for interface management RT302, the industry now has an established jargon, an established language. That means when I talk to my colleagues, some of you are here in the audience, or I talk to some of my competitors who are also here in the audience, we have a same jargon. We know we speak the same terms. We definitely have a better and clear understanding of why we need interface management and what kind of level or what is appropriate interface management on our projects. as our data showed, there is positive connection between cost performance and the appropriate level of interface management on our projects. And undoubtedly, when you have a formal approach to managing interfaces, you can identify and mitigate risks in the earlier project phases. So as I want to move on and kind of wrap up our presentation, and remind you, we do have a panel expert on stage afterwards. You know, RT302 is just the tip of the iceberg, and as we saw by one of our questions, our projects are only poised to get more and more complex. And as the complexity continues and increases, there definitely has to be further understanding, further research, hint, hint, on interface management and its impact on performance on our projects. And again, there was, from our research, positive connection between cost performance and appropriate use of interface management. So, Mr. Anako, where are you? There you are, sir. RT302 understood the need for greater confidence with your team's ability to deliver the complex project that you're constructing on our nation's capital. And RT302 is not only proud, but we too are confident that our tools and products will build your team's abilities. So we look forward to hearing all the good stories from the use of it. Now, I would like to wrap up. I want to go ahead and invite up our panel experts to the stage. If you guys can make your way up, please use the handrails while accessing the stage. I want to show a quick clip that's going to acknowledge some of those who were great contributors to the success of our research. And then I want to close with showing probably the best example of perfect interface management. All right, great. I want to introduce our panel of experts, starting with Dr. Carl Haas from the University of Waterloo, followed by Todd LaBar, which you met earlier from Air Products, Dr. SangHyun Lee from the University of Michigan, Lynn Wheatcraft from Dresser-Rand, and Mangus Wilson from the Smithsonian Institution. And with that, we've got about a good 10-15 minutes of questions, so I please open the floor. Any questions? Someone's always got to be the first. Questions? Okay, yes, ma'am, right up front here. Right here in the blue.
Hi, I was wondering, could any of you just chime in and say, like, give us some of the sort of the scary stories, the bad cases, maybe a bad case and a good case. A couple of different people could give examples of things that went wrong with interface management or somebody that did something that made things go right.
I would say Lynn or Mangus or Todd, as you guys on the construction side.
Yeah, Carl. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
They only have success stories. Anecdotally, there's a lot of stories of mismatches of equipment, and when you discover that at the latest moment, when you're marrying large modules, say offshore, it can be disastrous, literally, or connections that don't work. Critical path project delays because information conflicts, or you had the wrong information on a vendor's product. So it's a sort of avoidance of this risk, mitigating these risks through interface management that really creates the savings.
Thank you very much. Next question. I see one back in the corner, okay. And a great answer.
So first of all, thank you for your presentation, really interesting. I was curious at what different phases of the project you can use interface management. So you talked about it being most effective when you parallel project phasing, but can you use this at the work phase? I thought it was interesting that your final video was really right at the work phase, even though most of the examples that you had were from much earlier in a project.
That's a pretty good question.
Yeah, I mean, I believe what we found and what Dr. Lee pointed out regarding the initial point where they were going to implement, or at least from our research findings, where we were going to actually implement interface management. But ideally, you could do that at any point, and some of the points would be is like when you're doing through a bid phase and you want to qualify contractors or other suppliers, you could look at those two interface stakeholders and use a tool like ICAT, and then you can at least determine what your level of risk and complexity may be. So yes, you could use it at any phase. There's no single good point.
Absolutely. Anyone want to add to that?
Yeah.
Go ahead, man. Thank you.
Certainly, starting early is important. You get the most benefit. But once you start the interface management and you determine the proper level and where you need to apply it, typically it's to the most critical interfaces. You manage that all the way through the project. It's not something that you just initially start, but it's part of your project management methodology, and it's consistent all the way to the end of the project. So it's throughout.
Okay. Next question.
Is it on?
There we go.
Sorry. Good morning. Don Parker, Phillips 66 Risk Management. Can you talk briefly about the relationship, call it the chicken and egg relationship, between interface management and risk management, and how to manage the redundancy pieces of that?
Well, I think we see interface management as a subset of risk management. So it identifies a type or a set of risks, and it mitigates those risks primarily by managing information deliverables. So it manages the risk of confusion and too much iteration, as well as risks that subsequently occur in the field. That would be my best answer at this point. I'm hoping my colleagues have something to add to that.
That was perfect.
Does that answer your question?
Charlie Green with Aramco Services. Any advice or lessons learned in regards to software to manage all your interfaces you have?
So I'm going to more broadly interpret that as the cost-benefit sort of question. So if you think about the cost of implementing interface management at the most formal level, which included all those elements of the personnel, the formal software, the services, anecdotally, we think it might, we have anecdotal evidence that it might be about 0.2% of your capital project costs, the whole all-in cost. And you're looking at possible benefits of maybe 14% cost growth improvement. So it looks like there's probably going to be a good benefit cost ratio or payback on this. But of course, that's preliminary data with out of 46 different projects. So it's limited, and the cost number is very anecdotal at this point.
I think we've got time for maybe one more question, but just to let you know, during our next break, we'll congregate outside to answer more questions that you have at our next break. But we got one time for one more question.
Yeah, thanks. Roel Staesberg from Anglo Gold. I just had a question around one of your slides. You had the IM formality and project delivery strategy, where you measured how formally in each of those delivery strategies the approach had been. I was wondering whether you actually did a measurement of the number of interfaces as well for each of those particular approaches, so EPC, EPCM, and so on. So what would be the more complex approach?
Yes, I think I have a mic. Oh, that's a very interesting question, and we haven't looked at that specific different number of interfaces per different project strategy. But I think we also, that is something that we can explore next time, but I think that is a really interesting point that we can take a look at from our data. But at this time, we haven't seen that kind of perspective analysis yet.
Okay. Well, everyone, I want to thank you for your attendance. It's been a great experience for RT302. We look forward to future endeavors on the topic of interface management. I wish you all a most wonderful rest of the conference. And again, any further questions, we'll be happy to answer them at the next break. Thank you all very much.